Naruto's Fourth Great Ninja War marked the most monumental era of the shinobi history because the five nations are pulling together all their assets for the first time to take on a common enemy, with one of the Kage leading that effort being the fifth Kazekage and former Jinchuriki of the One-Tails, Gaara. Yet in the aftermath of the battles that are fought in the war and the efforts of the nations to pursue a path of peace and communication, things weren't exactly in a chummy place back in the Land of Wind. Over 2 years after the Ninja War ended, after Gaara had attended Naruto's wedding, there would be a series of events that transpired that would test Gaara as Kazekage in this new era, including one that would nearly see him killed due to political reasons, and the other would be a battle that would push Gaara as Kazekage in ways that you would not expect. Join me in today's newest edition of After Naruto Shippuden over here on Naruto Explained, where we take a look at the hardest battle that Gaara as Kazekage has engaged in after the Fourth Ninja War. For those of you guys who are new, After Naruto Shippuden is a series here on the channel where we take a look at stories and events that occur during the blank period of Naruto between Naruto chapter 699 and chapter 700. With many of these stories having never been animated, and there are a few that were animated and they had changes made to their story. Hence, the playlist is called After Naruto Shippuden. The information for this video is going to be coming to us via the Naruto epilogue story, Gaara Hiden, a Sandstorm Mirage, which was written by the former Boruto writer Ukyo Kodachi, and it is set several months after the wedding of Naruto and Hinata and before the wedding of Shikamaru and Temari occurs, making this one of the few stories that is the closest connected to the Boruto era and one of the last stories of the Naruto Shippuden era. In the scene that we're going to go over, Gaara, he has just finished reflecting on what it means to be a Sand Village shinobi and live on carrying out the legacy of a father who was once Kazekage before him. He's reflected on having once been the Jinchuriki of the One-Tails and how the ninja world has begun changing since the Fourth Ninja War ended, with the war starting out as a war against the Akatsuki to a battle for the fate of the planet against Kaguya, someone so powerful that the world had to rely on the members of Team 7 working in unison to take down an enemy that none of the other shinobi in the ninja world stood a chance against being useful. It was a sign of their own mortality as humans, for as strong as shinobi had become and for as much as they had endured, something that Gaara reveals that was core to his belief of what it means to be a shinobi. There were powers that were out there that went way beyond human comprehension. Kaguya was a proof of that. Whereas people like the fourth Raikage A would make a chakra cannon in secret during this time where the nations had agreed to follow the Land of Fire's lead in reducing military budget, you had people like Gaara who were beginning to take the approach that Naruto and Sasuke did, which is to begin to wonder if they needed to begin preparing for something greater than Kaguya, particularly after yet another Sasuke in the form of Toneri had arrived just under a year prior to this. Whereas Naruto and Sasuke had been spooked enough by Kaguya to begin training after the war because they had seen Kaguya's power up close and personal, Gaara, due to his duties as Kazekage, was a bit slower on the uptick in realizing that a threat might exist that required him to push through his own limits as well. However, that would be easier said than done due to the behind-the-scene politics that would lay the foundation for one of Gaara's hardest battles after the Fourth Ninja War. With the scene and the context being set, it's here I'll begin reading the scene from the story, and then I'll come back to you guys for my thoughts, and it's here I'm going to begin quoting. Gaara let out a sigh, and he looked up at the sky. Light from the evening sun fell on his head, softly, a shade that was closer to red than brown, and his face and his hair and good-looking, chiseled like marble. He wondered when he would finally be able to use his own free will and freely soar away into the sky, unburdened by his responsibilities. Well, right now he had an opponent to do battle with, a mountain of paperwork. Shinobi had all come together to fight against the Akatsuki, who had wanted to take control of the world, and the Akatsuki, they had been defeated along with Kaguya Otsutsuki. However, their battle to save the world, it had not been commissioned by anyone. Of course, most of the feudal lords, they had financed the battle since it was technically linked to national security for their nations. However, the Land of Wind, it had been keeping in ongoing limited arms policy for years now, so they balked at the sudden expenses after the war. After all, it was a battle between you ninja alone. The feudal lord had stubbornly argued with them, as if that reasoning made sense. It was something that he had said. Wasn't it the protection that his ninja village had given the feudal lord the reason that the feudal lord of the Land of Wind was even alive? The shinobi from the Sand Village who served under Gaara, they were completely furious. It wasn't unreasonable of them to feel that way. They weren't asking for money so they could live with luxuries. They weren't asking for gold. They were asking for basic needs, sanitary maternity hospitals for the sake of better care for infants, and constructions of water wells so no one will be in a difficult situation. Prior investment into research centers so they could keep up with the advance in technology of places like Konoha. He wanted pensions for shinobi who had been disabled by injuries sustained during the Fourth Ninja War, and the families who had lost their husbands fighting in the war itself. He wanted care for the children who no longer had parents. For all of those things, the people of his village, they needed money. And the job to retrieve that money from the feudal lord, well, that was currently something that Gaara was focusing on. It shouldn't have taken him this long to get this little progress. This was a job that didn't hold any flashy battles of ninjutsu or adventures of blood spilling down the flesh like he had experienced during his youth. Rather, it was wrestling with a straightforward paperwork and inconspicuously laying the groundwork for future accomplishments and boring mediation efforts between higher powers that went above himself, namely the feudal lord. Those were the reasons behind Gaara's single side. He had defeated countless shinobi using his ninjutsu, yet this was a battle he wasn't sure he would win. End quote. Now, for extra context, that part about wanting more materials for the hospitals in the Sand Village, that goes back to something that happened earlier in the timeline during the events of Sakura Hiden Love Ride in the Spring Breeze, which takes place directly after Naruto the Last, but before Naruto's wedding. So Gaara had previously requested of Kakashi for Sakura to head over to the Sand Village to help them reform his hospital system inside the village, as well as oversee the children's medical clinic that was being built inside the Sand Village that Sakura was setting up. However, just like in our own world, the problem with big ideas, even if they're meant to serve the people, is that big ideas usually cost big dollars. Shinobi villages, they don't earn enough on their own to sustain themselves, especially in this post-Cold War era where the shinobi villages during this early part of the alliance were sharing missions and intel before dispatching teams with people like Shikamaru and the others who would eventually become Kage in the Boruto era, minus Naruto because of him being severely unfit for such a thing due to obvious reasons being the overseeing of paperwork and intel meetings, and Naruto having the comprehension of a 2-year-old at this point. Gaara was running into the issue of the feudal lord of the Sand Village did not want to spend any more money. It was a problem that his own father had run into, which ultimately led to the alliance with Orochimaru. When you have a cheap feudal lord who wants to operate on the bare minimum regardless of the needs of the people inside the ninja village, it never ends well. Between that and the lack of action for Gaara to be engaged with, it was Gaara falling into a bit of a funk and lowering his sense of danger that was bubbling up between all the paperwork and the underbelly of the Sand Village that he had lost his pulse on, which goes back to Kankuro's words in Naruto's manga, where it hinted at the complex layer of the politics inside the Sand Village. When Gaara was made kazekage, they had to do a deep investigation into everyone who would be on the council, because even now, after everything that Gaara had accomplished, there were still those who were not quite ready to forgive the former Jinchuriki, and they didn't think that he was the right person for the job of kazekage. The significance of this moment is that it just goes to show you how much the ninja world had changed following the war, and that places like Konoha weren't the only ones with budget issues, nor were they above struggling with the transition to a peaceful era. And after such a traumatic experience during the Ninja War, dealing with powerful beings like Madara, Obito, and Kaguya, while there were some who feared what might be coming in the future, there were others who either longed for a return to what used to be, like in this instance of wanting to keep spending at a lower level, even though, as Gaara was pointing out, there was a need to serve the people, particularly those inside of the Sand Village, since there wasn't as much need for military power any longer, especially if they were going to keep up with Konoha, who had been making rapid expansion in technology during this time under Kakashi's sixth Hokage. The political side of Naruto, it is something that we did not see enough of in the anime, which is why I enjoyed these stories like this with Gaara. To learn more about what happens after Naruto Shippuden, you really want to click here to watch the videos from this playlist, or you want to click here to watch this video from my Anime Explained channel where I discuss non-Naruto content.